Have you ever sat alone in the morning, watching sunlight stream through the window, and felt an unexplainable emptiness in your heart? Though you have walked a long journey in life, have children and grandchildren, have a comfortable home, but somewhere inside, there is still a feeling that you are no longer valuable. You are not the only one who has felt this way. Past the age of 60, many people start to step back from the hustle of work. No longer the busy person, no more meetings, no longer the center of attention for colleagues or the financial pillar of the family. And then a question begins to surface in the mind. Am I still important? Charles from California, who was a high school teacher for nearly 35 years, after retiring, once confessed that some days he didn't want to get out of bed because he didn't know what to wake up for. Nobody needed his help. Nobody asked for his opinion anymore. I felt like I had become invisible, he said. The truth is, this feeling of uselessness after 60 doesn't come from a lack of ability. It comes from society and even yourself. Sometimes forgetting the true value that you carry within you. But here is what you need to remember. What you have lived, what you have experienced, does not just disappear. They become wisdom, life experience, treasures that no book, no course can ever replace. And if you are still here, it means your heart still desires, still has something to share, still has something to live for in a more meaningful way. In this video, we will walk together through things that you can do right now to reclaim your sense of value. It's not by doing more, but instead by reconnecting with your own self. Each small action, from a personal hobby to the act of sharing your experience, can rekindle that flame inside of you, warming yourself and also warming the people around you. If you have ever felt that you are fading away in this world, then this video is to remind you, you are still bright and that light has never gone out. Stick with me until the end, because the final minutes will be what helps you look at yourself again with completely different eyes. Let's begin. First, believe in your own worth. There is a strange thing that many people do not realize. After age 60, you may have built an entire life, but with just a few months of not being needed, you start to doubt yourself. The question silently appears in your mind. What am I worth now? This does not just happen to you. Elaine, a 68-year-old former librarian from Chicago, recalled that after retiring, every morning she still made coffee as usual. But instead of preparing for a busy day, she'd just sit, watch the steam rise from her cup, and wonder, who am I without my job? That is when we realize self-worth does not come from being busy or from a title. It comes from the person you are, from how you listen, from your life story, from the things you have overcome, and what you can give back. It is easy to forget this in a world that moves too fast. Somewhere people praise the new, they value the young. But just try to think, if a grandchild is confused about a career decision, who is the person they need? Someone who has just read a few skills books, or you, who has stumbled, has chosen wrong, has gotten back up, and clearly understands the consequences of every decision. Your value isn't found in certificates or on a LinkedIn profile. It lies in your knowing eyes, in a calm voice after many storms, in those seemingly simple phrases that make another person feel relieved. And if you feel like you have become a nobody, then perhaps what you need is not to change yourself, but to look at yourself with new eyes. Try writing down 3 things you have accomplished, no matter how small. Recall a person who once said to you, "Because of you, I have." Those small pieces are the proof that you are still present and still have an influence. Because sometimes the only thing you need to find your value again is not the applause of others, but a gentle nod from your own heart that says, I am still useful, and I am still living a meaningful life. Second, look back at the achievements in your life. Have you ever sat in silence and tried to look back on your journey, not with a critical eye, but with gratitude? Because the truth is, you have gone farther than you think. Samuel, a 72-year-old from a suburb in Oregon, once admitted that there was a time when he felt he had nothing to be proud of. But then one day during dinner, his grandson asked, "Grandpa, how did you learn to fix things without YouTube?" That question made him laugh, but it also made him start to remember. He remembered the days when he was young, working tirelessly in the workshop to raise three children through school. He remembered the first house he and his wife painted and repaired themselves. Remembered the times his car broke down and he fixed it with just pliers and a small steel wire. And he realized an achievement isn't always a degree or a medal. It can be a full meal, advice that makes someone stronger, or simply the persistence to keep going, even when no one sees. You might think, I haven't done anything great, but please remember every callus on your hand, every wrinkle on your face is a trace of something you have overcome. A mother who stayed up all night caring for a sick child, a father who quietly skipped meals to pay for his child's tuition, a person who once accepted sacrificing a dream to keep their family stable. And if you forget those things, then try opening a blank notebook and write them down. Every small milestone, every single thing you have done. It does not need to be great, just real. It could be the fact that you persistently raised your child while your marriage was breaking apart, or that you learned to live alone after a loved one passed away without losing your kind heart. Because looking back is not for regret. It is to remind yourself that you were strong, you were kind, you were enough, even in circumstances that were not easy to overcome. And that is an achievement, one that needs no certificate, but is so worthy of you embracing yourself and saying, I have lived a worthwhile life. Third, spend time on personal hobbies. There is something few people tell you after you retire. You not only lose your qualm, but you also lose the reason to do what you love. When you were young, hobbies were often set aside for responsibilities. But after 60, the opposite happens. You have the time, but you have forgotten what you used to like. Ruth, a 66-year-old from San Diego, was a nurse for nearly 40 years. After she retired, she felt the days stretched on endlessly, until one day her daughter found an old paper box in the basement. Inside were dozens of pencil drawings that she had sketched back in high school. I once dreamed of being an artist, she said softly. And then, for the first time in decades, she picked up a colored pencil again. Her first strokes were clumsy, but she felt as if she were coming alive again. Not at age 20, but in the feeling of doing something that warmed her heart. Each afternoon, she would sit by the window, drawing while listening to her favorite music. I don't draw to sell paintings. I draw to find myself again, she said. You do not need to have a special talent. A small garden in the backyard, a few lines of poetry written in a notebook, a cake you bake yourself, all are ways for you to converse with yourself again. A hobby not only keeps you busy, but is also the bridge that leads you back to where you once felt alive. What did you like to do when you were young? Play an instrument, sew, collect stamps, write letters by hand. It might have been a very long time since you have touched it, not because you no longer wanted to, but because you thought, what's the point anymore? But those very things are the way you care for your own soul when no one reminds you to do it anymore. Give yourself 1 hour each day, not for anyone, not to please anyone, just so you remember you still have passion, still have curiosity, still want to create something, even if it is just an unfinished knitted scarf. And sometimes that is the only thing you need to see that tomorrow is more worth waiting for. Fourth, reconnect with friends and relatives. Do you remember the last time that you called an old friend, not just to ask after them out of pure politeness, but to truly tell one another a small story, like when we were young, making coffee while chatting on endlessly without stopping? After the age of 60, many people gradually fall into a quiet shell. Each day passes with no telephone ringing, no one knocking on the door, no long conversations. You might think, oh, they are busy, or there is nothing to tell, and then quietly accept the silence as a part of old age. But the truth is, humans were not born to live in isolation. Linda, a 70-year-old living alone in Arizona after her husband passed away, once had 3 very close friends from her university days. But because everyone had their own life swept them away, and 10 years passed without a single reunion. One evening, while looking through an old album, she suddenly saw a picture of the 4 of them laughing heartily on a picnic in 1982. Her hand trembled. She picked up her phone and called one of them. The voice on the other end hesitated, then cried out, I've been waiting for this call for 10 years. That conversation lasted for nearly 3 hours. And the magical thing was, from one phone call, the whole group gradually reconnected, meeting via Zoom every month, then decided to take an old age trip the next year. Linda said, I didn't just find my friends again. I found my old self again. You do not need a big reason to call someone. A simple question, how have you been lately? An old photo that you send, or even just a text message. I was just thinking of you, is sometimes enough to awaken a connection that seemed to be dormant. And with your family. Sometimes they are living right next to you, but between you and them is a silent distance. Start again with the smallest things. Invite your grandchild to play a game. Ask your child for a story from their day. Invite the whole family for a meal you cooked yourself. Connection does not need to be loud. It just needs to be sincere. Because getting older doesn't mean cutting yourself off. On the contrary, it is the time to sew up the frayed pieces of fabric, to mend the threads that were once loose, and to remind yourself that to be connected is to be alive. No one is born to quietly retreat. Everyone deserves to have someone to laugh with, to remember with, to tell old stories with, and you yourself, can be the one to begin. Fifth, participate in volunteer activities. When you reach the age of 60, a quiet but powerful feeling often appears. I want to do something meaningful. Not to prove anything, but to see that your remaining time is being spent in a valuable way. Teresa, a 69-year-old from Seattle, was once an accountant. After retiring, she found herself with too much free time. At first, she enjoyed it, walking, reading, gardening. But just months later, one afternoon, looking at her yard, she felt the days had become too quiet. I felt like I was no longer a part of anything, she recalled. Then by chance, she saw an announcement recruiting volunteers to read books for children at the nearby community library. She thought, I have never taught children, but I like books. Let's try. The first week she was clumsy. The second week, a little boy came and hugged her and said, you tell stories better than the TV. From that day on, she never missed a session. Volunteering is not always about doing heavy work or going far away. It could be visiting a nursing home to read poetry for someone older than you. It is helping to prepare meals for the homeless. It is sitting and listening to a young person who is lost and needs a tolerant perspective. You do not need a big activity to make an impact. An afternoon you spend folding blankets, arranging relief supplies, or simply writing a few cards to send to people in the hospital can also be the reason someone smiles. Many people are hesitant. I am not as nimble anymore. But sometimes what people need from you isn't speed, but patience. Not strong hands, but a warm heart. You have time, a precious thing that many young people do not have. And when you share that, you are not only helping others, you are healing yourself. Because doing something kind is the easiest way to remember that you can still bring value. And sometimes just a hand to hold, a fond look, a silent presence, is enough to make the world a little lighter. All thanks to you. Sixth, share your experience with the younger generation. There is one thing that young people today are lacking, not information, but life experience. In a world full of online knowledge, they can look up anything, but they do not know how to listen, how to be patient, how to overcome their first failure. And that is where you, with all you have gone through, can become a quiet but steady guide. Frank, a 73-year-old former mechanic from Minnesota, has a 17-year-old grandson who is passionate about technology but always gets frustrated when he faces difficulties. One day the boy's printer got jammed, and Frank happened to be there. He not only fixed it, but also told a story of when he had to learn to disassemble a machine weighing hundreds of pounds, with only a hand-drawn blueprint in his memory. The grandson was silent, listening carefully to every detail. After that day, he began to ask his grandfather more questions, not just about machines, but about how to handle things when work goes wrong, when colleagues disagree, when he felt lost himself. No one teaches you how to be a useful person after you retire, but sometimes just by opening up, sharing a story from your youth, about the time you were fired but still got back up, about a marriage that once broke and how you mended it, is enough to make a young person feel less alone. You can start by writing a short memoir. not for publishing, but for your grandchildren and great-grandchildren to one day read and understand, were my grandparents really that strong? You can also volunteer to tutor a struggling student or simply listen to a lost young person without judgment, just nodding, asking more questions, and letting them find their own answers. Sharing isn't about lecturing. It is the way you show others. You have made mistakes, you have learned lessons, and you are still learning. Because life experience, when shared with humility and love, also, is a priceless gift that no Google search can replace. And you yourself, are holding gems that the next generation desperately needs. Seventh, maintain a positive lifestyle. There is a gentle but profound truth. No one is born with a positive life. It is always a choice, repeated again and again, in the most ordinary moments. Helen, a 75-year-old from Florida, lived alone after her husband died of cancer. The first few months, she only stayed around the house, barely talking to anyone. Then one morning, while watering her plants, she saw a small flower blooming in a pot she thought was barren. She said she suddenly felt moved, and for the first time in months, she put on an old song and made herself a cup of tea. From that day on, each day she chose to do one small thing that made her feel happy: going out for a 10-minute walk, calling her sister, rearranging her bookshelf, or simply sitting to watch the rain and writing a few lines in her journal. Nothing big, but after a month she started to smile again. Not because all the sadness disappeared, but because she started choosing to look at the small light in each day. A positive lifestyle doesn't mean being happy all the time. It is when you allow yourself to be sad, but do not let the sadness pull you down forever. It is when you still feel grateful, even if just for hearing the birds singing outside today. You do not need to change your whole life in one day. Start with one small action. Write down 3 things that made you feel pleasant today. It could be the smell of freshly baked bread, a hug from a grandchild, or even just the warm feeling of wrapping a familiar woolen scarf. When you choose to live positively, you are not just helping your mood get better. Science has proven people who maintain positive habits have stronger immune systems, have fewer chronic diseases, and live longer. But most importantly, they live with the feeling that they are still living in a complete way. Old age does not mean stepping back and withdrawing. On the contrary, it is a time when you can live more gently, more slowly, but more profoundly than ever before. And each day you choose to see life with gentle eyes is a day you are healing yourself, while also planting seeds of hope for those around you. We've just walked on a journey together, not to learn something new, but to remember everything you already have. You have lived, you have loved, you have cared for others your whole life. Now you do not need to become useful in the way of others. You just need to realize you still have value, still have light, still have something to give and to receive. From believing in yourself again, looking back at what you have accomplished, to spending time on small hobbies, reconnecting with loved ones, participating in kind activities, sharing experiences with the young, and maintaining a positive lifestyle. All of this is not to become someone else, but for you to return to being yourself. Maybe you have felt forgotten, but please remember, no one can replace your role in this world. You are a part of a bigger story, an indispensable piece in the hearts of those you have touched, even just once. And no matter what age you are, you still have tomorrow. There is still a cup of tea not yet drunk, a story not yet told, a person who has not heard what you have kept in your heart. So ask yourself, how do I want to live my tomorrow? What do I want to start again? What do I want to give back to life before closing my journey? If you have an answer, even a small one, start there. And if you don't, well, you've just found the starting line of a new journey. Thanks for sticking with me. If anything in this video resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. It doesn't have to be long, just from the heart. Even a simple "I understand" means the world. I'll see you again on a beautiful day when you can smile and say, "I am still here and I am still needed."